Elena Hartley had been planning the launch of With Love, Elena for over a year. From the very first brainstorming session in her Montecito home office, she had envisioned something soft, poetic, and affirming, a letter to the world from a woman who had endured scandal, royalty, and reinvention. She imagined a montage of tea being poured slowly into porcelain, soft wind brushing white curtains, her voice layered gently over scenes of morning rituals. She didn't want a documentary. She wanted an invitation, something people could wrap themselves in like a linen robe after a bath. Her director, Julian Frost, understood this vision. He was a quiet man in his early 40s with a silver beard and calm tone, often scribbling notes in a leather-bound notebook instead of speaking. He took her notes seriously, handwritten phrases like sacred stillness, ancestral nourishment, and grace in silence. He didn't challenge her much. He built around her mood, treating each filming session as a meditation. Elena liked that. It gave her control. When Netflix greenlit the project, her circle of advisors expanded. Theo Ramsey, the sharp-minded brand strategist behind As Ever, became deeply involved. He was efficient, often blunt, and always 2 steps ahead of potential criticism. Theo had cautioned Elena early on, warning her that personal storytelling walked a fine line, but she brushed it off. She believed people wanted something beautiful, something rooted in self-love. The premiere night arrived on a crisp spring evening. Elena walked the red carpet wearing an off-white Dior gown, hand-stitched with floral motifs, her hair pinned back like a classic film star. Julian stood a few feet behind her, watching her soak in the flashes of photographers. Theo stood closer to the doors, checking his phone constantly. The theater was filled with influencers, journalists, Netflix executives, and several wellness brand ambassadors already in quiet partnership with As Ever. Elena took her seat in the center of the third row. Julian sat on her left. Her assistant handed her a tiny earpiece, which she used to track live global comments. Elena believed it would help her understand real-time reception. The film began with a soft piano score and Elena's voice whispering over shots of early morning fog rolling across the Santa Barbara hills. Within the first 10 minutes, she described her journey as a return to sacred femininity, while placing dried sage in a copper bowl and lighting it with a match. The screen flashed with imagery of desert rituals, African women harvesting herbs, and Persian poetry etched on glass. Julian noticed the first rustle from the Netflix content manager 2 rows behind them. She leaned into her colleague and tapped her phone with concern. He noticed Theo's jaw tighten, but Elena, eyes fixed on the screen, smiled faintly. She felt proud. Her truth was unfolding. By the time the third segment aired, a sequence where Elena claimed her great-grandmother was a midwife with spiritual ties to tribal medicine, the audience's mood shifted. Some attendees pulled out their phones discreetly. Others whispered, raising brows. Theo got up, stepped outside, and called Layla, the PR head. Outside the theater, Theo stood with his phone pressed to his ear as Layla updated him in real time. She told him that social media had already begun reacting. TikTok influencers were posting side-by-side clips calling out cultural appropriation. Reddit threads were exploding with posts dissecting historical inaccuracies. Inside, Elena remained seated, unaware of the full extent of what was unfolding online. She continued watching herself on screen, sipping matcha, brushing her child's hair, writing calligraphy with quotes from ancient Eastern scriptures. She thought it was healing. But the public, it seemed, didn't see the same thing. As the film ended and the lights slowly brightened, applause was scattered. Some stood awkwardly. Others remained seated, whispering to one another. Elena turned to Julian, expecting reassurance. He only nodded once quietly. Backstage, the team gathered for a debrief. Mark Dillon, the legal advisor, had already compiled 3 potential risk alerts. Theo was pacing, trying to draft a holding statement. Julian leaned against the wall, arms folded. Elena stood in front of the dressing room mirror, dabbing under her eyes with a silk cloth. She looked tired, not from the backlash yet, but from the weight of her own expectations. Theo finally turned to Elena, read them again and again. She then asked if she should pull the show from Netflix. Mark told her that wasn't an option. Netflix owned distribution for 12 months. But Theo added that she could release a second project, a clarifying video, maybe a podcast, maybe a simple voiceover to steer the conversation. She agreed without saying much more. Julian took that as a cue and began listing what they could shoot that very weekend casual, handheld shots of Elena journaling. Speaking plainly, without production lighting, she nodded again. She was agreeable now, almost robotic. The meeting ended an hour later. The men left first Theo to the studio's analytics department, Mark to legal. Julian lingered, unsure whether to speak to Elena or give her space. She sat alone at the table, scrolling through comments, some harsh, some surprisingly gentle. Andre acute Varick called that afternoon. Theo had reached out quietly, knowing they might need external help. Andre was the kind of man you only called when you needed to redirect a storm. He asked for a full media report and told Theo to have no one issue any public apology, not yet. That night, Elena walked into her home studio. She sat down in front of a microphone and recorded her own voice in a single take. No script. Just a reflection. She talked about intention, about art, about not wanting to hurt. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't cry. She simply spoke like a woman standing still in the eye of a storm, hoping someone out there would hear her without judgment. She listened to it once, then closed the file. She didn't send it, not yet. Outside, the lavender was blooming. Inside, her brand was cracking. And no one knew which one she'd try to save first. 3 days after Elena recorded the unsent voice file, the tone inside as Ever's headquarters began to shift from reaction to control. The air had changed. The nervous pacing from earlier. And the week was replaced with cold calculation. Andre Varick arrived that morning without ceremony, stepping into the office just after sunrise, dressed in a navy suit and wool overcoat despite the California warmth. He didn't offer greetings or ask questions. He simply placed a manila folder on Theo's desk and asked for a quiet room with a whiteboard. Theo escorted him upstairs without protest. He had known Andre from a previous scandal involving a luxury fitness brand whose founder had been accused of misrepresenting indigenous practices. That case had nearly drowned the company. Andre had spun it into a best-selling memoir. His reputation was ruthless. And that's exactly what Theo believed they needed now. Inside the war room, Andre wrote 4 words on the whiteboard: reposition, strip, humanize, stall. Then he began assigning tasks. He told Theo to gather all behind-the-scenes footage that had not been used in With Love, Elena. He specifically asked for clips that showed Elena laughing off script, looking uncertain, or even struggling with pronunciation of certain lines. Anything that could show hesitation. Learning, vulnerability. He explained that perfection was no longer her friend, imperfection had to be the new face. Then he called in Layla, the PR head, and instructed her to line up a series of low-pressure interviews with mid-tier podcasts and non-traditional wellness blogs. He said those platforms were more forgiving, more conversational. He said Elena needed to be heard, not defended. Mark Dillon was next. Andre asked him to audit the entire As Ever product catalog and pull anything that even hinted at spiritual or cultural references. No Sanskrit script. No tribal language. No ancestral blend claims. He wanted everything reworded or paused. Mark hesitated briefly, pointing out the logistical chaos such a request would create. But Andre didn't blink. He reminded him that chaos was already present. The difference now was whether they choreographed it or not. Meanwhile, Julian Frost began editing a raw, introspective. And slowly, without fanfare, with love, Elena began to breathe. Again. Inside, as Ever's now half-empty headquarters, the shift was visible. The scent of lavender diffuser oil still lingered in the corners of the minimalist halls, but the buzz was gone. Several departments had downsized. The influencer division had been folded entirely. The polished espresso bar on the third floor no longer operated, and the brand's once-a-week wellness luncheons were replaced by silent Zoom syncs attended by fewer and fewer staff. Theo Ramsey had stepped back, officially, citing health reasons, though insiders knew it was burnout mixed with exhaustion from defending a brand identity that had been constantly reshaping itself in real time. He didn't clear his office. He simply left the keys on the desk and took a long walk that morning down Santa Monica Beach, never confirming if he'd return. Julian Frost had declined to work on the podcast series that followed. After finishing the final edits on the director's cut, he told Elena he needed to return to storytelling that wasn't reactionary. He left her with a small envelope, a thumb drive, and a note. The note simply read, "This version was real. Use it how you want." Then he disconnected entirely, booking a quiet retreat somewhere in New Mexico, beyond the reach of signal. Only Andre Varick remained close to Elena's side, but even he had begun to loosen his grip. He came to the villa less often now, sending short bullet point emails every few days. He believed the worst had passed. His plan had worked. The documentary's new reception had stabilized Elena's image not as a flawless icon, but as a woman capable of learning, of listening. Meanwhile, as Ever continued to operate in a much leaner form. Products were no longer packaged in gold-trimmed boxes or tied with philosophical quotes. The brand dropped all spiritual references and rebranded itself around comfort and simplicity soaps that smelled like clean rain. Creams that didn't promise transformation, just hydration. The team began calling it the soft reset. Elena's voice returned in a different form through a new podcast titled Letters to Myself. It featured quiet readings of her personal reflections, some recorded on her patio, others in her child's nursery. The first few episodes were met with cautious optimism. A particular episode, where she spoke about the ache of wanting to be loved without being misunderstood, touched listeners deeply. It didn't go viral, but it stayed. People listened, while folding laundry, while cooking dinner, while falling asleep. That, somehow, felt more enduring than the flash of trending HHES. Back at the villa, Elena's daily rhythm changed. She no longer started her mornings with brand meetings or strategic decks. Instead, she took walks with her son through the Chitum through the Mera instead. Hillside paths, greeting neighbors, lingering in farmers' markets longer than necessary. She wrote each evening not for the public, not for a campaign, but for herself. She filled journal after journal with fragments, thoughts, doubts, recipes, dreams. One morning, she received a handwritten letter in return from a fan, addressed not to Elena the figure, but Elena the mother who tried. It included a pressed flower and a simple message. "I didn't understand you at first, now I do. Thank you for staying." She sat with that letter for a long time. The media had mostly moved on. New controversies replaced old ones. Streaming platforms pushed new faces, new dramas. Elena was no